In this video, we're going to do a graphic organizer for factoring, and I think this might be some help to keep next to you as you go through these factoring problems. Because what it does, step number one, we always check for a GCF before we do anything else. Step number two, look and see how many terms you have. If you have two terms, then it has to be one of these three situations. Difference of squares, a squared minus b squared will always factor into conjugates. A squared minus b squared will factor into a times a, plus and minus b times b. An example of that would be something like 4x squared minus 25. Difference of squares factor into conjugates, plus and minus. 4x squared is a 2x times itself, and 25 would be a 5 times itself. Or you might have sum of cubes, and here's your formula for sum of cubes. A to the third plus b to the third is equal to a plus b times a squared minus ab plus b squared. Here's an example. X to the third plus 27. Now, one thing I do like to do is rewrite this as something to the third plus something else, which in this case would be a 3 to the third. Then identify your a and your b from your formula up here, a and b, and just simply plug it in for a and b. And this would be an x plus 3. Take out the a, put in an x, and that'd be x squared minus, take out the a and b and put in a 3 and an x, and then plus b to the second would be 3 to the second, which is 9. Difference of cubes works the exact same way, except for your formula is slightly different. It'd be a minus b times a squared plus ab plus b squared. Let's do an example. Let's do maybe 64x to the third minus 20, or since we used 27 on the last one, we'll do 125. So let's rewrite this as something to the third. I know 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. X times x times x is x to the third. So this whole term is 4x to the third minus 125 would be 5 to the third. So we've identified our a and b. So we now, in our formula, simply take out the a and put in 4x, take out the b and put in a 5. And just continue doing that. Everywhere you have an a, put a 4x. Now, if it's a squared, you do have to square both pieces. That'll be a 16 and an x squared. Plus, to multiply a times b will be 4x times 5, which is 20x. Don't get this minus here mixed up with it. And then plus b to the second will be 5 to the second, which is 25. Now, that's if you have two terms. Then you say, well, what if I have three terms? How might I be able to factor that? Trinomials are factored one of two ways. X squared minus 6x plus 8 is a trinomial. If the front number is a 1, you simply do two sets of parentheses, x times x, and ask yourself what adds and multiplies. That'd be a negative 2 and a negative 4, and that's it. If there's a number out front, you're a little bit different. We're going to use slip and slide in this case. So let's do 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. Slip and slide method does this. Step number one, take the number in front, slip it to the end. That'd be x squared plus 5x plus 6. You then factor like normal. That'd be an x plus 2 and an x plus 3. Now the number you slipped, you now divide by. If it's divisible, you'll divide it. If it's not divisible, like here, you try to reduce it. If it's not reducible, you slide the bottom back to the front. That'd be a 3x plus 2. Again, the second term. If it's divisible, divide it. If it's not divisible, try to reduce it, and then you slide it. When 3 over 3, though, that's divisible, so we can just divide that. And then if there are four terms, the last option, we have just 2, 3, or 4. That's all we can factor right now. We're going to try factoring by regrouping. And here's an example of that. If you have four terms, we're going to try, and this doesn't always work, but we're going to try to group the first two and the last two terms together. The first two terms have an x squared in common. Factor it out. You're left with an x and you're left with a minus 1. The second set of parentheses has a 3 in common. Factor it out. You're left with x and you're left with a minus 1. Now look at what you've got. If the same thing is in both set of parentheses, you will now factor that out. Factor out an x minus 1. Here you're left with an x squared. Here you're left with a plus 3. Now sometimes that will be factorable again, but in this case it is not.